Hello everyone and welcome to another video. And what we're going to do today is take the content that we learned this morning about the CED, the course and exam description, and how all those components work together to make the course, and learn how to schedule your year out with the course and exam description. So we're going to take the units of study and we're going to take your school calendar, the calendar of your district, and sync them together to plan the units of study out for the course of the year. So let's start by looking at some of the units in the course at a glance. You'll remember that at the top of every unit you have the suggested number of days to teach those topics. So here in Unit 1 you have 10 to 13 days recommended. Now you may ask, well, where did they come up with those days? Or what is a day here? And a day here is a traditional 45-minute to 50-minute class period. So if you're on some type of block scheduling, just remember that a 90-minute day is 2 of these days when you're planning. Now the original design was to set up a system where teachers could simply teach consecutively through the numbered topics in every unit. That means you could start in Unit 1 with 1.1 and then go on to the next one, 1.2, and so forth and so on throughout each unit. When you've been through all the topics in Unit 1, you just jump over to Unit 2 and you move through those. Now I think a lot of us started that way last year. I know I did. But very quickly, I saw that there was a lot of cross-pollination of topics between Units 1 and Units 2, so I ended up kind of meshing them together and came up with a mashup, so to speak, of Units 1 and Unit 2 that I will share with you at the end of this video. So let's look at the entire course at a glance, all 9 units of study. If you take the low range and the high range of all 9 units and add them together, they suggest that you have 113 to 140 days to teach this course. And they came up with those numbers in order to accommodate those teachers who begin in September after Labor Day. So this course would neatly fit into their school year as well. If you begin before then it's just good for you that you have more days to teach the course. Now you'll also notice that these units of study fall within the time periods that we saw when we examined the CED earlier. So you have 4 chunks of time in AP World History Modern, beginning with 1200 and ending with the present. So units 1 and 2 fall within the time period 1200 to 1450. For that reason, I've made that a unit in my class. That is a testable chunk of content. So I give my first summative after we finish Unit 2. So I test 1200 to 1450 together. And again, it just makes sense to me because a lot of those topics kind of blend into each other and it makes for a more organic unit of study. Okay, so what's the process for using the CED to plan your units of instruction? Well, page 18 of the CED has a very useful chart to help us. We see all 9 units of study, the chronological time periods, plus the percentage each unit is weighted on the AP exam. This will allow us to plan a reasonable completion date for each unit or each chronological time period if that's how you choose to teach the course. Now to get this done, we're also going to need your school's academic calendar for the year. So here's mine. And what we'll do with the calendar is determine the total number of instructional days that we have to teach the 9 units of the course. Now bear in mind that this is different than the total number of instructional days at your school for several reasons. First of all, we have to have the content done before the AP test, not by the end of your school's academic year or the final exam dates for your school. Also, you might want to plan some type of introductory unit or foundational, or what some teachers call a 0 unit at the beginning of the year. And also at the end, you might want to save some time for review before the AP exam. So let's walk through this. My school starts early, about August 6th this year. But you know, the first day is always used for introductions, schedule changes, and getting forms signed, so I'll begin my planning at August 10th. Now, I do teach a foundations unit for 2 reasons. First of all, I think it provides context for where we actually begin the course at 1200. Also, my foundations unit is a bench on which to introduce and work out the skills for the class. There'll be another video today on some of my foundation unit lessons, but basically, I briefly cover the Neolithic Revolution, the basic features of classical states and their decline, and the major belief systems. And I spend 3 weeks on this. Now, if your schedule doesn't allow this, just bear in mind this is not testable content. It's something that you should only do if your schedule allows it. Now, I highly recommend that you plan some type of review at the end of the year. Okay, now this year the AP test is on May 10th, which is a Monday, and that's a little bit unusual for us. Usually the AP test is on a Thursday of the second week of AP testing. So I need to be done by May the 10th. Now, as a rule of thumb, I like to finish all my course content around tax day, so the week of April 15th. This gives me several weeks to review with students before they take the AP test. So I discount several weeks on either end of instruction for a foundation unit and for review. And from there, I will calculate the total instructional days I have in the school year. Now, I've created a form to help plan the end dates for each unit or each chronological period. You can find a link to it below in the description section of this video. Now, since I teach Units 1 and Units 2 together, I count the total weighting for Units 1 and Units 2, and I get 16 to 20% of my instructional days. So I do the math to figure out how many days that actually is, and I simply count forward on my calendar, and for me this year, it will be September 30th. So that's when I'll be done with Units 1 and 2. I'll do the same thing on my next unit, which will be a combination of Units 3 and 4, and mark that on the calendar. So it's the same thing whether you're using units as testable sections or chronological time periods as I do. You're simply going to count forward the number of days you have based on the percentage of total instructional days and mark the dates on your calendar. Now, of course, there's some flexibility here. If I'm not done by September 30th with Unit 2, I can take another day or two. However, this becomes a zero-sum game because the AP test does not move. So if I go beyond my calculated dates, that means another unit will lose some instructional time. Now, one of your asynchronous assignments today, after watching this video, is to do exactly this, is to go and get this form and calculate your end dates for your units, if you use them, or by the chronological time periods, and submit that into the forum. But before we go, I want to show you what I do to mix together topics from Units 1 and Units 2, or really any topics that exist inside one chronological time period to make what I think is a freer flowing teaching unit. So last year, when this was all new to everybody, I was teaching Topic 1.1, Developments in East Asia. But I realized in teaching East Asia, it was connected to some of the topics in Unit 2, for example, the Silk Roads. So I combined instruction from Topic 1.1 with 2.1. And because the Silk Roads spread new crops, it spread disease pathogens, I also pulled together the environmental consequences of connectivity, which is Topic 2.4, and added that as well. So that became an instructional unit for me. Those topics just seem to go together very well. And the same thing can be said of Topic 1.2, which is developments in the Dar al-Islam. So when you teach Islam, you teach about how merchant-friendly it is, how it led to trade routes across the Sahara, and Islam followed the gold and the salt trade across the Sahara. And when Islam got to West Africa, it allowed for the rise of new states, the first empires in sub-Saharan Africa. And through the spread of Islam, you had cultural diffusion as well, math and science, Arabic, and Islam, of course, itself. So I combined all those together and made that a teachable unit as well. And really, it's likely that you'll find these topics addressed together in a college textbook. Same thing with Topic 1.3. I mean, how can you talk about developments in South and Southeast Asia without talking about exchanges in the Indian Ocean? Then state buildings in the Americas, that's basically a comparison between the Aztec, Inca, and Maya. And then the Mongols. Now, remember, there's not just one way to do this. In teaching the Mongols, I'll probably revisit the Silk Roads because the Mongols reconstitute the Silk Roads in their empire. And across the Silk Roads, they also spread disease pathogens. So there is environmental consequences of connectivity as well. I think it's good to go back and forth, to revisit topics in different contexts. It certainly adds some reinforcement to student learning. And lastly, you have developments in Europe. This is basically the feudal social system, the decentralized political system of Europe, and also the role of Roman Catholicism in European society and culture. So something else you're going to do in today's asynchronous lesson is something like I've just done, but with another time period. So look at page 18 in the CED, look at that chart, and take one of the chronological time periods. Take the units and try to mash them together in the similar ways you've seen here. Now I know you might not teach it that way, but I think it's very important to see the connectivity between different topics and that you explicitly make these connections when you teach. And I'll tell you one reason for that. Sometimes students don't understand the content of a question or assessment item when they actually know it. And when they find the answer to a question later, they knock themselves on the head and say, I knew that. And the reason for that is content can be asked in many different ways. For example, I was teaching my students about the contraction of empires between 1750 and 1900. That's how it's worded in one of the topics. And they couldn't name any empires that contracted. But then I asked them about the independence movements in Latin America, about Simón Bolívar, about Mexican independence, Latin American independence. And they didn't understand that the independence of these areas in Latin America and South America was the same thing as the contraction of the Spanish Empire. So by constantly making these explicit connections across topics, I think they'll be better versed to do well on the AP test and understand the questions that are being asked. So that will be your assignment based on this video, to first of all mark out on your calendar the units of study and the dates that you'll have, and also to take a chronological time period and mash it up and share that with us on the forum. So that's the end of this video, and I will see you guys live tomorrow.